Ancient Greece was a collection of city-states scattered across the Mediterranean, each with its own character and customs, yet united by a shared language and an intricate tapestry of stories that explained their world. These were not the dramatic, action-packed tales you might expect, but rather gentle, meandering stories that unfolded like morning mist over ancient olive groves. The Greeks lived in a time when the boundary between the everyday and the divine was as thin as gossamer, when gods walked among mortals and ordinary objects held extraordinary power. Picture the Greece of 3,000 years ago, where white marble temples dotted hillsides covered in wild thyme and rosemary. The air was clean and clear, carrying the scent of cypress trees and the distant salt of the Aegean Sea. In these ancient times, people rose with the sun and retired when darkness fell, their lives intimately connected to the natural rhythms of earth and sky. There were no electric lights to disturb the natural progression from day to night, no urgent schedules to disrupt the gentle flow of time. The Greeks understood that stories served a purpose beyond mere entertainment. These myths were like soft blankets woven from tradition, providing comfort and meaning to daily life. They explained why the seasons changed, why storms arose over the sea, why certain plants grew in particular places. But tonight, we are not concerned with the dramatic battles or passionate love affairs that often dominate these tales. Instead, we will explore the quieter moments, the peaceful interludes, the gentle wisdom that flows like honey from these ancient stories. In the coastal villages, fishermen would mend their nets by lamplight while grandmothers shared stories of the old gods. These were not tales of thunder and lightning, but of quiet transformations, of gentle guidance, of the soft magic that touched everyday life. The stories moved at the pace of natural things, the gradual ripening of figs, the slow movement of clouds across an azure sky, the gentle lapping of waves against sun-warmed stones. The temples where these stories were honored were places of profound peace. Built from local stone, they sat in perfect harmony with their surroundings, their columns reaching skyward like ancient trees. Inside, the air was cool and still, fragrant with the smoke of gentle incense made from local herbs. Worshippers would enter quietly, their sandaled feet making soft sounds against polished marble floors. Here, in these sacred spaces, the myths took on a contemplative quality, becoming meditations on the deeper mysteries of existence. Greek society valued wisdom and contemplation as much as action and achievement. Philosophers would gather in shaded groves, discussing the nature of reality in voices as soft as rustling leaves. Students would sit in circles on grass meadows, absorbing knowledge at a pace that honored both learning and rest. The pursuit of wisdom was not rushed or aggressive, but gentle and patient, like water slowly wearing smooth the edges of rough stone. The daily rhythm of ancient Greek life followed patterns as old as humanity itself. People woke naturally with the dawn, worked during the cooler hours of morning and evening, and rested during the heat of midday. Meals were simple and shared, consisting of bread, olives, cheese, and wine, eaten in the company of family and friends. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by comfortable silences and the distant sound of goats' bells echoing across terraced hillsides. In the evenings, as purple shadows lengthened across the landscape, communities would gather for the gentle sharing of stories. These were not dramatic performances but quiet recitations, voices rising and falling like gentle waves. Children would curl up against their elders, drowsy from the day's activities, listening with half-closed eyes to tales that had been told for countless generations. The stories themselves seemed to encourage this drowsy state, their familiar rhythms as soothing as a mother's lullaby. The gods in these quiet moments were not the tempestuous beings of epic poetry, but gentle presences who watched over the small, everyday miracles of mortal life. They were there in the first green shoots of spring, in the warm weight of a sleeping cat, in the perfect roundness of a full moon. Their power was not in dramatic displays but in the quiet maintenance of natural order, in the gentle guidance they offered to those who paid attention to subtle signs and soft whispers. Greek artisans working in marble and bronze understood this gentle aspect of the divine. Their sculptures captured not moments of high drama but instances of quiet contemplation, a goddess lost in thought, a shepherd boy drowsing against a tree, a nymph trailing her fingers in a still pool. These works of art invited viewers to pause, to breathe deeply, to enter into the same peaceful state that the artist had captured in stone. The landscape itself seemed designed for contemplation. Rolling hills covered in silver-green olive trees stretched to distant mountains whose peaks were often shrouded in soft clouds. Ancient paths wound between these hills, worn smooth by countless feet over countless centuries. Walking these paths was a form of meditation in itself, each step falling into the rhythm established by generations of travelers who had passed this way before. Springs and groves were considered sacred spaces where the boundary between worlds grew thin. Here, travelers would pause to drink cool water and rest in dappled shade. These were places where time seemed to slow down, where the urgent concerns of daily life gave way to a deeper awareness of the eternal patterns that governed all existence. It was in places like these that the gentlest myths were born, stories that emphasized harmony, balance, and the quiet wisdom found in simply being present to the moment. As evening approaches in our ancient Greek setting, we find ourselves walking along a well-worn path that leads away from the bustle of the agora and up into the hills where the olive groves give way to wilder terrain. The air is soft and warm, carrying the mingled scents of wild herbs, distant wood smoke, and the faint salt tang of the sea. Each step along this path takes us further from the ordinary world and closer to a place where the old stories live and breathe with gentle life. The path beneath your feet is smooth limestone, polished by countless pilgrims who have walked this way over the centuries. It winds gradually upward, never steep enough to cause strain, but rising gently toward a grove of ancient oak trees that has been sacred since time immemorial. These are not the dramatic, towering oaks of northern forests, but the smaller, more intimate evergreen oaks of the Mediterranean, their leaves a silvery green that whispers softly in the evening breeze. As we walk, the sounds of human activity fade behind us, replaced by the gentle symphony of the natural world settling into evening rhythms. Somewhere in the distance, a shepherd's pipe plays a melody so old that no one remembers who first composed it. The notes drift and flow like water, rising and falling in patterns that seem to mirror the rolling landscape around us. Birds call softly from hidden perches, their songs growing gradually quieter as the light begins to fade. The approaching grove appears as a dark cluster of trees against the pale stone of the hillside. Even from a distance, there is something special about this place, something that makes the air itself feel different. Ancient Greeks would have called it a temenos, a sacred enclosure where the divine presence was particularly strong. But this is not the awesome, overwhelming presence of the storm god or the earthquake shaker. This is something gentler, more like the quiet strength of growing things, the patient wisdom of stones, the soft persistence of flowing water. As we draw nearer to the grove, we begin to see the details that mark this as a place apart from the ordinary world. Small offerings have been left along the path, a perfect shell, a handful of wildflowers, a small clay vessel filled with olive oil. These are not the grand sacrifices described in epic poems, but the simple gifts that ordinary people bring to express their gratitude for life's small blessings. A safe journey, a successful harvest, a child's recovery from illness, the return of a loved one from across the sea. The entrance to the grove is marked not by imposing gates or stern warnings, but by a simple stone marker worn smooth by age and weather. Carved into its surface are symbols so old that their original meaning has been forgotten, but their power to evoke a sense of peace and reverence remains undiminished. They seem to say, without words, that this is a place for quiet thoughts, for gentle reflection, for the kind of deep listening that allows the soul to hear its own wisdom. Stepping into the grove is like entering a natural cathedral. The canopy of oak leaves creates a soft, green ceiling that filters the evening light into a gentle glow. The temperature here is noticeably cooler, and the air carries the rich, earthy scent of leaf mold and growing things. Ancient Greeks believed that certain places were charged with a special kind of energy, and standing here among these trees, it's easy to understand what they meant. The grove is not empty of human presence, but the signs of human activity here are subtle and respectful. A few simple stone benches have been placed among the trees, positioned to take advantage of natural clearings where the filtered light creates perfect spots for quiet contemplation. Someone has cleared a small area and arranged stones in a rough circle, creating a simple outdoor shrine. The offerings here are similar to those along the path: flowers, small vessels of oil and wine, pieces of honeycomb wrapped in vine leaves. A small spring emerges from the rocks at the far end of the grove, its water bubbling up from unknown depths and flowing away in a stream so clear that it seems to sing as it moves over polished stones. This spring was probably the reason the grove was considered sacred in the first place. Water was precious in the Mediterranean world, and a spring that never failed, even in the driest years, was surely a gift from the gods. The water is cool and sweet, perfect for washing travel dust from hands and face before settling in for a time of quiet reflection. The acoustic qualities of the grove are remarkable. Sounds from the outside world seem to fade away completely once you're beneath the trees, while sounds within the grove are amplified and clarified. The whisper of leaves, the soft splash of the spring, the distant call of an owl preparing for its nightly hunt, all become part of a natural symphony that encourages deep listening and peaceful introspection. As we settle onto one of the stone benches, the transition from the walking rhythm to stillness allows us to become more aware of the subtle energies of this place. Ancient Greeks would have said that the local spirits, the nymphs and minor deities who watched over such places, were making themselves known through these gentle sensations. Modern minds might explain it differently, but the experience remains the same, a gradual settling into a state of relaxed awareness, a feeling of being welcomed and protected, a sense that this is a place where time moves differently and healing can occur. The light continues to fade gradually, but there's no sense of urgency or encroaching darkness. Instead, the approaching night feels like a soft blanket being drawn slowly over the world, a natural and comforting transition from the activities of day to the rest and restoration of night. In this grove, surrounded by the gentle presences that ancient Greeks believed inhabited such places, we are perfectly positioned to receive the quiet wisdom of the old stories, tales that were meant not to excite or alarm, but to soothe and heal and gently guide the listener toward the peaceful sleep that awaits at the end of our journey together. The light filtering through the oak leaves has taken on that special quality that only exists at dusk, a soft golden glow that seems to emanate from the leaves themselves rather than from any external source. In this gentle illumination, the grove takes on an almost dreamlike quality, as if we have somehow stepped outside the normal flow of time and into a space where the old stories live and breathe with quiet life. An evening breeze stirs the leaves above us, creating a sound like gentle conversation in a language just beyond understanding. Ancient Greeks would have said this was the voice of the tree nymphs, the dryads who lived within the oak trees and who sometimes, in the evening hours when the boundary between worlds grew thin, would share their ancient wisdom with patient listeners. Tonight, their whispers seem to be telling us the first of our gentle myths, a story so old and familiar that it feels less like a tale being told and more like a memory slowly surfacing from the depths of collective human experience. This is the story of Demeter and her eternal cycle, but not the dramatic version with the violent abduction and desperate searching. Instead, this is the quieter truth that lies beneath that surface story, the gentle rhythm of the seasons that the ancient farmers knew in their bones. Demeter, the grain mother, moves through her yearly cycle with the patience of growing things, the steady persistence of seeds that wait in dark earth for the right moment to push toward light. In our grove, as the evening deepens, we can feel this rhythm in our own bodies, the same cycle that governs the sprouting of seeds and the ripening of fruit. There is a time for growth and a time for rest, a time for activity and a time for the deep stillness that allows renewal to occur. Demeter understood this rhythm better than anyone, and her story is really the story of how to live in harmony with these natural cycles rather than fighting against them. The ancient farmers who first told this story knew that forcing growth never worked. Seeds planted too early would rot in cold, wet soil. Grain harvested too late would fall to the ground and be lost. There was a right time for everything, and wisdom lay in recognizing these natural rhythms and moving with them rather than against them. Demeter's story was their way of remembering this essential truth, a teaching story disguised as myth. As we sit in the growing dusk, we can imagine Demeter herself moving quietly through the grove, her presence felt rather than seen. She is not the grieving mother of the dramatic versions, but the patient teacher who helps her human children understand the deeper patterns that govern all life. Her touch is felt in the way the temperature gradually cools as night approaches, in the way our own bodies naturally begin to prepare for rest, in the way our breathing automatically deepens and slows in the peaceful atmosphere of the sacred grove. The story continues in the language of sensation rather than words. We feel the deep satisfaction that comes at the end of a productive day, the pleasant tiredness that settles into our muscles and bones. This is Demeter's gift to those who live in harmony with natural rhythms, the deep, restful sleep that comes when we have worked and rested in proper proportion, when we have neither pushed too hard nor been completely idle, but have found that perfect balance that allows both productivity and peace. Another presence seems to join us in the grove as the darkness deepens, bringing with it the story of Artemis in her aspect as the gentle protector of wild things. This is not the fierce huntress of some tales, but the nurturing guardian who watches over the vulnerable creatures of forest and field. In the soft hooting of an owl somewhere in the darkness, in the rustle of small animals settling into their night shelters, we hear her quiet presence keeping watch over all who need protection and rest. Artemis teaches us about the importance of boundaries, but not the harsh, defensive boundaries of conflict and rejection. Instead, she shows us how to create the kind of gentle boundaries that protect without isolating, that preserve our essential nature while still allowing connection with others. Like the deer who know exactly how close they can allow a human to approach before they must move away, we can learn to sense what we need for our own well-being and to honor those needs without apology or explanation. The grove itself demonstrates this principle perfectly. It is set apart from the ordinary world, protected by its sacred nature, yet it welcomes all who approach with peaceful intentions. The ancient Greeks understood that some spaces needed to be preserved from the everyday demands of life, places where the soul could retreat and restore itself. Artemis was the guardian of such spaces, ensuring that they remained available for those who needed the healing that only solitude and silence can provide. As night continues to fall around us, the temperature drops just enough to make us more aware of our own physical comfort. The stone bench beneath us retains the warmth of the day's sun, and the air is still and mild. Our bodies begin the natural transition toward sleep, muscles relaxing, breathing deepening, the active mind gradually giving way to the receptive state that welcomes rest and dreams. The stories that Artemis tells are mostly wordless, communicated through the sense of safety that her presence brings. In the ancient world, night could be dangerous, filled with wild animals and human predators. But in a space under her protection, night becomes a friend rather than a threat, a gentle companion that offers the gift of deep rest and the dreams that restore the soul. Under her watchful care, we can let go of the need to remain alert and vigilant, knowing that we are held in safety by powers far greater and more reliable than our own. The final presence that seems to join us as full darkness settles over the grove is that of Hypnos, the personification of sleep itself. In the earliest Greek traditions, Hypnos was not a dramatic figure but a gentle, almost invisible presence whose touch brought peace and restoration. His gift was the ability to let go, to release the concerns and tensions of the day and sink into the healing darkness of sleep. Hypnos teaches us that sleep is not simply the absence of wakefulness, but a positive state in its own right, a time when the deeper processes of healing and integration can occur. In sleep, the body repairs itself, the mind processes the experiences of the day, and the soul communes with the deeper patterns of existence. This is not empty unconsciousness, but rich, restorative activity that occurs beneath the threshold of ordinary awareness. The grove has now settled into its full nighttime character, transformed from the sun-dappled sanctuary of evening into something deeper and more mysterious. The darkness is not complete, a quarter moon has risen above the oak trees, casting just enough silver light to define the shapes of leaves and branches without overwhelming the essential intimacy of night. In this gentle illumination, the grove reveals different aspects of its character, becoming a space perfectly designed for the kinds of stories that can only be told in darkness. The temperature has settled into that perfect range that the human body finds most conducive to deep relaxation. There is no chill to cause tension, no warmth to create restlessness, just a mild neutrality that allows complete physical comfort. The stone bench beneath us seems to have adjusted its temperature to match our own, becoming a part of our physical support system rather than something separate and foreign. Ancient Greeks would have said that the spirits of the place were making us welcome, ensuring our comfort so that we could receive the gifts they wanted to share. In this deeper darkness, our other senses become more acute. The sound of the small spring seems louder now, its gentle bubbling creating a natural rhythm that encourages the slowing of heartbeat and breathing. The scent of the grove is richer too, filled with the complex perfume of night-blooming flowers, the earthy smell of dew forming on stone and leaf, the faint sweetness of night-flying insects visiting unseen blossoms. It is in this heightened state of non-visual awareness that the story of echo comes to visit us, but not the tragic echo of the dramatic myths. This is the older, gentler echo, the one who simply represents the way sound moves through sacred spaces, the way words and thoughts can be reflected back to us with new meaning and deeper understanding. In the acoustic perfection of the grove, every small sound returns to us subtly changed, carrying with it something we had not noticed before. Echo, in this gentler version of her story, is not trapped or punished, but rather serves as a teacher of deep listening. She shows us how to attend not just to the surface meaning of words, but to the spaces between words, the silences that give meaning to sound, the way a simple phrase can carry different messages depending on how and where it is spoken. In the grove, our own breathing becomes part of this teaching, each exhale returning to us on the still air as a reminder of our own presence and vitality. As we practice this kind of listening, another story begins to unfold around us, the tale of Endymion, the shepherd who was granted eternal sleep. But this is not a story of curse or punishment, rather, it is a teaching about the deep wisdom that can only be accessed in states of profound rest. Endymion discovered that in the deepest states of sleep, consciousness does not disappear but transforms into something more subtle and far-reaching than ordinary waking awareness. The moon above us, visible now through the oak leaves, is said to visit Endymion nightly in his eternal rest, sharing with him the secrets that can only be learned in the liminal space between sleeping and waking. These are not dramatic revelations or earth-shaking prophecies, but the quiet wisdom that comes from complete surrender to natural processes, the understanding that emerges when we stop trying to control every aspect of our experience and instead learn to trust the deeper intelligence that governs all life. Endymion's story teaches us about the value of what the ancient Greeks called divine idleness, the kind of rest that is not merely the absence of activity but a positive state of receptive awareness. In this state, the usual boundaries between self and world begin to soften, and we begin to sense our connection to the larger patterns that govern the natural world. This is not a loss of individuality, but rather an expansion of identity to include our relationships with all the other beings and forces that share our existence. As the night deepens further, we become aware of the presence of Nyx herself, the primordial goddess of night. In the earliest Greek traditions, Nyx was not a fearsome figure but the gentle mother of sleep and dreams, the one who drew the star-spangled blanket of darkness across the world each evening so that all living beings could rest and restore themselves. Her touch is felt in the way our eyelids naturally grow heavy, in the way our thoughts begin to slow and soften, in the way our bodies sink more deeply into whatever supports them. Nyx reminds us that darkness is not the opposite of light but its complement, equally necessary for the maintenance of life and health. In the constant light of modern civilization, we sometimes forget that darkness is a positive force, offering its own gifts and opportunities. In darkness, the harsh edges of daylight concerns soften and dissolve. In darkness, the soul finds the privacy it needs for its own mysterious processes of renewal and integration. The story that Nyx tells is the story of natural cycles and the wisdom of surrender to forces larger than our individual will. Like the plants that close their flowers at night and the animals that seek their burrows and nests, humans too are meant to surrender periodically to the healing power of darkness and rest. This surrender is not defeat but recognition, not weakness but wisdom, not giving up but giving in to the natural rhythms that sustain all life. In the grove, surrounded by the gentle presence of these ancient powers, we can feel our own resistance to rest melting away like morning mist. The tensions that we carry in our bodies begin to dissolve, not through force or effort, but through the simple recognition that we are held and supported by powers far greater and more reliable than our own anxious vigilance. The grove itself becomes a metaphor for this larger holding, a place where we can safely let go of our need to remain constantly alert and protective. Another figure that seems to move through the grove in the deeper darkness is Morpheus, the shaper of dreams. Unlike his later Roman associations with sleep itself, the Greek Morpheus was specifically the deity who gave form to the dreams that visit us in the deepest states of rest. His gift was the ability to translate the abstract wisdom of the unconscious into forms that the dreaming mind could understand and remember upon waking. Morpheus teaches us that dreams are not random firing of neurons or meaningless replaying of daily events, but purposeful communications from the deeper layers of our own wisdom. In the ancient understanding, dreams were the way that the soul processed experience, integrated learning, and sometimes received guidance from sources beyond ordinary consciousness. This is not supernatural thinking but recognition of the sophisticated intelligence that operates below the threshold of everyday awareness. The dreams that Morpheus shapes for us are like the gentle stories we have been sharing in the grove, not dramatic or frightening, but soothing and restorative, filled with images of natural beauty and peaceful resolution. These are the dreams that heal rather than disturb, that integrate rather than fragment, that leave us refreshed and renewed rather than anxious and depleted. The grove has now entered its deepest phase of night, a time when the boundary between the physical world and the realm of spirit becomes most permeable. The moonlight filtering through the oak leaves has taken on an almost liquid quality, pooling in small clearings and flowing along the forest floor like spilled silver. In this ethereal illumination, the familiar becomes mysterious without becoming threatening, transformed into something that invites contemplation rather than action. Our bodies have now fully adjusted to the rhythm of this place, settling into a state of profound relaxation that goes beyond mere physical comfort. This is the kind of deep rest that the ancient Greeks called sacred leisure, a state in which the usual urgency of daily life gives way to a timeless quality of being. In this state, the stories that visit us are less like external narratives and more like wisdom arising from our own deepest knowing. The presence that seems most strong in this deep night hour is that of Hestia, the goddess of the hearth who represents the still center around which all activity revolves. Unlike her more dramatic divine relatives, Hestia's power lies in her ability to create sacred space through simple presence. She does not act upon the world so much as hold space for others to find their own center and peace. In the grove, Hestia's presence is felt as a quality of absolute safety and acceptance. Like a perfectly tended hearth fire that provides warmth without demanding attention, her energy creates an environment in which all beings can relax into their essential nature. This is not the dramatic acceptance that must be fought for or proven worthy of, but the quiet recognition that every being belongs exactly where they are, exactly as they are, in this moment. Hestia's story is the story of coming home to ourselves, of finding that place of inner stillness that no external circumstance can disturb. In the ancient world, her fire burned continuously in temples and homes, a symbol of the continuous presence of the sacred in the midst of ordinary life. That fire represents the awareness that is always present beneath the surface turbulence of thoughts and emotions, the consciousness that remains calm and clear regardless of what storms may rage in the outer world. As we rest in Hestia's peaceful presence, another story begins to unfold, the tale of the river Lethe, whose waters brought the gift of forgetting. But this is not the frightening forgetting that erases all memory and identity. Instead, this is the healing forgetting that allows us to release the accumulated tensions and disappointments of the day, the grudges and worries that serve no useful purpose and only weigh down the spirit. The waters of Lethe flow gently through the grove in the form of the small spring, offering their gift to any who are ready to receive it. This forgetting is not loss but liberation, not emptiness but spaciousness. When we release the need to carry every slight and disappointment, every anxiety and regret, we create space for new experiences, fresh perspectives, and the kind of spontaneous joy that can only arise in a mind unburdened by the past. Drinking from these metaphorical waters of forgetting, we discover that what remains after letting go of the unnecessary is not less than what we had before, but infinitely more. When we stop defining ourselves by our accumulated wounds and worries, we discover the vast spaciousness of our essential nature, the part of us that remains untouched by the passing circumstances of life. Another river flows through our nighttime contemplation, the river Styx, but again not in its dramatic role as boundary between life and death. Instead, this is the Styx as the river of commitment, the power that flows through us when we align ourselves completely with our deepest values and intentions. This is not the grim determination of forcing our will upon the world, but the gentle persistence that comes from knowing with absolute certainty what is truly important. The Styx teaches us about the kind of commitment that sustains rather than depletes, the alignment with purpose that feels like flowing with a current rather than swimming against it. When we discover what we are truly meant to be doing with our lives, effort becomes effortless, work becomes play, and even the most challenging tasks feel like natural expressions of our essential nature. In the deep quiet of the grove, we can feel this current of authentic purpose flowing through our own lives, carrying us toward our highest good with the same inevitability that water flows toward the sea. This is not a forcing or striving, but a recognition and surrender to the movement that wants to happen through us when we stop trying to control every outcome and instead trust the deeper intelligence that governs all life. The figure of Iris appears in our contemplation, not as the dramatic messenger of the gods racing across the sky, but as the gentle presence that creates bridges between different realms of experience. Iris represents the rainbow consciousness that can hold multiple perspectives simultaneously without needing to choose just one. In her presence, apparent contradictions resolve into complementary aspects of a larger truth. Iris teaches us that we do not need to choose between rest and activity, between solitude and connection, between individual identity and universal belonging. These apparent opposites are actually different colors in the spectrum of human experience, each valuable and necessary, each flowing naturally into the others when we stop forcing artificial separations. In the grove, under Iris's influence, we can feel the boundaries between inner and outer, self and other, human and nature beginning to soften without disappearing entirely. We remain clearly ourselves while simultaneously feeling our deep connection to all the other beings and forces that share this moment with us. This is not loss of identity but expansion of identity, not confusion but clarity about the larger patterns of which our individual lives are a part. As the night reaches its deepest point, the presence of Oneiros joins our contemplation, bringing with him the gift of prophetic dreams. But these are not the dramatic prophecies of epic literature, warning of disasters or promising great victories. Instead, these are the gentle guidance dreams that come to anyone who has learned to listen to the wisdom of their own deepest knowing. Oneiros shows us that prophecy is not about predicting specific future events, but about understanding the natural consequences of present choices and patterns. When we are truly aligned with our authentic nature and purpose, the future unfolds with a sense of rightness and inevitability that feels less like prediction and more like recognition of what was always meant to be. The dreams that visit us under Oneiros's influence are filled with images of natural beauty and peaceful resolution, visions of ourselves living in harmony with our deepest values and highest aspirations. These dreams do not create unrealistic expectations but rather remind us of possibilities that we have always carried within us, potentials that await only our willingness to embrace them fully. We have now entered the most profound phase of our nighttime journey, a state that the ancient Greeks would have recognized as the deepest form of sacred communion with the divine powers that govern rest and restoration. The grove around us has become less a physical place and more a state of consciousness, a sanctuary of the spirit where the ordinary rules of time and space seem suspended in favor of a more fluid and healing reality. In this deep state, our breathing has naturally synchronized with the subtle rhythms of the place itself, the gentle movement of air through the oak leaves, the soft bubbling of the spring, the distant sound of night creatures going about their peaceful business. This synchronization is not something we have forced or created, but something that has happened naturally as our own rhythms have gradually aligned with the deeper patterns of the natural world. The presence that seems strongest in this deepest hour is that of Asclepius, but not in his role as healer of dramatic diseases or worker of miraculous cures. Instead, this is Asclepius as the gentle restorer of natural balance, the one who understands that most healing happens not through intervention but through the removal of obstacles to the body's own wisdom. His presence in the grove is felt as a quality of deep trust in the natural processes of restoration and renewal. Asclepius teaches us that healing is not something that happens to us but something that we allow to happen through us. Like plants that automatically turn toward the light and roots that instinctively grow toward water, our bodies and minds have an innate wisdom that knows how to restore balance when given the right conditions. The grove provides these conditions: safety, quiet, natural beauty, and the kind of deep rest that allows all the repair mechanisms of body and spirit to function at their optimal level. In the ancient healing temples dedicated to Asclepius, patients would engage in a practice called temple sleep, spending the night in sacred spaces designed to promote the kind of deep rest in which healing naturally occurs. Our grove has become such a temple, a place where we can practice this ancient art of therapeutic rest, allowing our bodies and minds to remember their own capacity for self-repair and renewal. The serpent that was Asclepius's sacred animal appears in our meditation not as a symbol of danger or temptation, but as a representation of the wisdom that knows how to shed what is no longer needed. Serpents periodically shed their entire skin, emerging refreshed and renewed, freed from the accumulated wear and damage of their previous covering. In the same way, we can learn to shed the accumulated stress and tension of daily life, emerging from our periods of deep rest refreshed and renewed. This shedding is not a violent process but a natural and gentle one, like the way trees release their leaves in autumn without trauma or loss. What we shed in these deep states of rest are not essential parts of ourselves but the unnecessary burdens we have taken on, the tensions that serve no useful purpose, the worries that solve no problems, the resentments that heal no wounds. Letting go of these allows our essential nature to emerge more clearly, like the bright new skin revealed when a serpent sheds its old covering. Another presence that moves through our deep meditation is that of Hypnos in his most profound aspect, not simply as the bringer of sleep but as the guardian of the liminal state between sleeping and waking where the deepest healing occurs. This is the state that mystics and healers of all traditions have recognized as the gateway to expanded awareness and accelerated healing. In this liminal state, the usual boundaries of consciousness become fluid and permeable. We remain aware but in a different way than ordinary waking consciousness, more receptive and less analytical, more feeling and less thinking. This is the state in which insights arise spontaneously, creative solutions appear without effort, and healing happens at levels deeper than ordinary medicine can reach. Hypnos shows us that this state is not exotic or supernatural but completely natural, as much a part of our human birthright as breathing or digesting food. Like any natural capacity, it can be cultivated and refined through practice, but it does not require special training or unusual talent. What it requires is simply the willingness to let go of the need to control every aspect of our experience and trust the deeper intelligence that operates below the threshold of ordinary awareness. The grove itself seems to pulse gently with this liminal energy, creating conditions that naturally encourage this expanded state of consciousness. The filtered moonlight, the soft sounds of night, the perfect temperature, the sense of safety and protection all combine to create an environment in which the usual guardians of consciousness can relax their vigilance and allow us to explore subtler realms of awareness. In this deep state, the distinction between inner and outer, between self and environment, begins to blur in the most gentle and natural way. We do not lose our sense of individual identity but rather discover that our individual identity is much more fluid and inclusive than we usually imagine. We begin to sense our connection not just to the grove and its trees and springs, but to the entire web of life of which we are an inseparable part. This is the state that the ancient Greeks called enthusiasm, meaning literally, filled with the divine. But this is not the dramatic possession of ecstatic religious experience. Instead, it is the quiet recognition that what we call the divine is not separate from our own deepest nature but is the very ground of our being, the consciousness within consciousness, the awareness that is aware of awareness itself. The figure of pneuma, the divine breath, moves through our meditation as the recognition that the same life force that animates all living beings flows through us as well. Our breathing becomes a conscious participation in this universal rhythm, each inhalation a receiving of life force, each exhalation a contribution to the ongoing creation of the world. In this awareness, breathing becomes a form of prayer, not prayer as petition or request, but prayer as conscious participation in the fundamental rhythms of existence. We breathe with the trees that surround us, sharing in the great exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide that connects all plant and animal life. We breathe with the earth itself, participating in the great cycles of atmosphere and ocean that maintain the conditions necessary for life to flourish. This conscious breathing does not require effort or concentration but happens naturally when we relax into the present moment completely. Like all the deepest spiritual practices, it is less about doing something new and more about recognizing and cooperating with what is already happening. The breath breathes us as much as we breathe the breath, and in recognizing this, we discover our participation in the great breathing of the cosmos itself. As this deepest phase of our meditation continues, we become aware of the presence of Sophia, the personification of wisdom itself. But this is not wisdom as information or knowledge, but wisdom as direct insight into the nature of reality. This wisdom arises not from thinking or analyzing but from the simple willingness to be completely present to what is happening right now, without judgment or the need to change anything. Sophia's teaching is communicated not in words but in the quality of awareness itself, the recognition that everything we need to know is available to us in this moment if we simply learn how to look and listen and feel with complete attention. This is not mystical or supernatural knowing but the natural wisdom that emerges when the mind becomes completely quiet and receptive. In this profound hour of the night, we have entered a state of consciousness that the ancient Greeks would have recognized as the highest form of sacred communion, a direct experience of the divine presence that underlies all existence. The grove around us has become completely transparent, simultaneously fully present and completely permeable, existing at the intersection of the physical and spiritual realms where the deepest mysteries reveal themselves to patient seekers. Our awareness has expanded far beyond the boundaries of ordinary individual consciousness while remaining perfectly grounded in the simple reality of our bodies resting peacefully in this sacred space. This is not a leaving of the physical world but a recognition of the sacred dimension that has been present all along, hidden in plain sight beneath the surface of ordinary experience. The presence that seems to fill the entire grove now is that of Zeus, but not Zeus as the dramatic ruler of the gods wielding thunderbolts and making pronouncements. This is Zeus in his most essential aspect as the principle of conscious awareness itself, the divine consciousness that is the ground of all being. His presence is felt not as something outside ourselves but as the very awareness with which we are aware, the consciousness that is reading these words and having this experience. In this recognition, the ancient teaching about humans being made in the image of the gods reveals its deepest meaning. We are not separate beings occasionally visited by divine consciousness, but expressions of divine consciousness itself, individual manifestations of the same awareness that animates all existence. This is not a philosophical concept but a direct experience, as immediate and undeniable as the sensation of breathing or the beating of our hearts. Zeus in this aspect teaches us about the nature of true authority, not the external authority that commands through force or fear, but the internal authority that comes from complete alignment with our deepest truth. When we recognize our essential nature as consciousness itself, we discover a source of guidance and strength that is completely reliable because it is not separate from who we truly are. This recognition brings with it a profound sense of homecoming, as if we have been searching everywhere for something that was never actually lost. Like Dorothy discovering that she always had the power to return home, we discover that what we have been seeking through all our spiritual practices and philosophical inquiries has been our own essential nature all along. The presence of Hera joins this deepest communion, but not as the jealous wife of mythology, but as the divine feminine principle that creates and maintains the sacred bonds that hold the universe together. In this aspect, Hera represents the love that is not mere emotion but the fundamental force that draws all beings into harmonious relationship with each other and with the whole of existence. This love is felt in the grove as the recognition that we are not isolated individuals struggling alone in a hostile universe, but beloved participants in a cosmic community that includes every being that has ever existed or ever will exist. This is not sentimental feeling but direct perception of the web of connection that links all consciousness together in one vast, interconnected whole. Hera's presence brings with it the understanding that relationship is not something added to our individual existence but the very ground of existence itself. We exist only in relationship, to our bodies, to our environment, to other beings, to the consciousness that is our deepest nature. Recognition of this truth dissolves the illusion of separation that is the source of most human suffering and reveals the unity that has been present all along. In this state of expanded awareness, the figure of Apollo appears, not as the dramatic god of poetry and prophecy, but as the principle of divine harmony that creates beauty and meaning out of what might otherwise be chaos. Apollo's presence is felt as the recognition that existence itself is a work of art, a cosmic symphony in which every being plays an essential part. The harmony that Apollo represents is not the static perfection of a finished work, but the dynamic balance of a living system that maintains its coherence while constantly changing and evolving. Like a jazz musician who knows when to follow the melody and when to improvise, we learn to participate in this cosmic harmony by listening deeply to the rhythms and patterns that are always present and finding our unique way of contributing to the overall composition. Apollo teaches us that beauty is not merely decoration added to existence but the visible expression of underlying truth and order. When we align ourselves with the deepest patterns of reality, our lives naturally become more beautiful, not through external adornment but through the kind of authentic expression that springs from complete honesty about who we are and what we are here to offer. The presence of Athena emerges in this deepest communion as the wisdom that arises spontaneously when consciousness recognizes its own nature. This is not wisdom gained through study or experience, though these may prepare the ground, but the direct knowing that emerges when the mind becomes completely still and receptive to its own deepest understanding. Athena's wisdom is practical and immediate, showing us exactly what needs to be done in each moment to maintain our alignment with truth and compassion. This guidance does not come as external commands or abstract principles but as the natural response of consciousness to whatever situation presents itself. Like water that automatically flows around obstacles, this wisdom finds the most harmonious way to move through any circumstance. In the grove, under Athena's influence, we experience the state that the ancient Greeks called sophrosyne, usually translated as moderation but actually meaning something closer to deep sanity or profound clarity. This is the state in which all of our faculties work together in perfect harmony, emotions and intellect and intuition all contributing their unique gifts to a unified response to reality. The figure of Hermes appears as the messenger who carries communications between different levels of consciousness, helping us understand how the insights received in these deep states can be integrated into our ordinary daily lives. Hermes represents the principle of translation, the ability to express transcendent truths in forms that can be understood and applied by the practical mind. Hermes teaches us that spiritual realization is not meant to remain a private experience but to be shared through our words, actions, and way of being in the world. The insights that arise in meditation and contemplation are gifts not just for our own development but for the healing and upliftment of all beings with whom we come into contact. The translation that Hermes facilitates is not a diminishment of transcendent truth but its natural expression through the medium of human life. Like light that remains essentially the same whether it shines through clear glass or colored glass, divine consciousness expresses itself uniquely through each individual while remaining fundamentally unchanged. As this profound phase of our journey continues, we become aware of the presence of Dionysus, but not as the wild god of wine and ecstasy, but as the principle of divine joy that emerges naturally when consciousness recognizes its own unlimited nature. This joy is not dependent on external circumstances but arises spontaneously from the simple fact of being aware, of participating consciously in the great dance of existence. This joy is felt in the grove as a quality of effervescent aliveness that permeates every cell of our being. It is not the temporary pleasure that comes from getting what we want, but the permanent celebration that comes from recognizing that what we most deeply want is what we most essentially are. This recognition transforms every moment from a problem to be solved into a gift to be received, every experience from a burden to be carried into an opportunity for deeper awakening. Dionysus teaches us that enlightenment is not a grim achievement earned through years of suffering and self-denial, but the natural state of consciousness when it is no longer defending itself against its own nature. Like a river that sings when it is allowed to flow freely, consciousness expresses its joy spontaneously when it is no longer constrained by false beliefs about limitation and separation. As our profound journey through the realms of divine consciousness begins its natural return toward the ordinary world, we find ourselves still held in the loving embrace of the sacred grove, but with a subtle shift in the quality of awareness. The transcendent states of the previous hour are gently transforming into something more intimate and personal, preparing us for the final transition into the healing darkness of sacred sleep. The moon has moved across the sky during our contemplation, and its light now filters through the oak leaves at a different angle, creating new patterns of shadow and illumination on the forest floor. This change in lighting seems to signal that it is time for the deep insights and expansive awareness of the night's peak to begin their gentle integration into the more human scale of individual consciousness. The presence of Morpheus returns to our awareness, but now he comes not just as the shaper of dreams but as the gentle guide who helps consciousness make the transition from the expanded states of deep meditation to the more bounded awareness of approaching sleep. His touch is felt as a gradual softening of the edges of wakefulness, a natural dissolution of the effort to maintain any particular state of consciousness. Under Morpheus's influence, we begin to feel the natural tiredness that comes after any profound spiritual experience. This is not the depletion that follows overexertion, but the pleasant fatigue that comes when consciousness has been stretched to its fullest capacity and is now ready to rest and integrate what has been received. Like an athlete who has run a perfect race or an artist who has completed a masterwork, we feel the deep satisfaction that comes from having given ourselves completely to something worthwhile. This tiredness is welcomed rather than resisted, recognized as the natural complement to the expansion we have experienced. Just as inhalation naturally gives way to exhalation, and day naturally yields to night, periods of expanded awareness naturally give way to periods of rest and integration. This is not a falling away from spiritual achievement but a completion of the natural cycle that allows for true assimilation of what has been learned. The grove itself seems to be preparing for our departure into sleep, taking on the quality of a loving parent tucking a child into bed after a day of wonderful adventures. The air grows slightly cooler, encouraging us to draw whatever covering we have closer around our bodies. The sounds of the night creatures become more intermittent and softer, as if they too are preparing for the deeper rest that comes in the hours before dawn. The presence of Nyx returns with a deeper and more maternal quality than before, her starry robes seeming to descend around the grove like the ultimate blanket, promising protection and nurturing throughout the hours of sleep that lie ahead. Under her care, the approach of unconsciousness feels not like a loss but like a return to the most fundamental form of trust, the willingness to surrender completely to forces beyond our control. Nyx reminds us that sleep is not simply the absence of wakefulness but a positive state in its own right, a time when consciousness withdraws from the outer world in order to commune more directly with its own source. In sleep, the soul returns to its home in the realm of pure awareness, gathering the strength and wisdom needed for another day of embodied existence. The figure of Thanatos, the personification of death, might seem an ominous presence, but in the context of our sacred grove he appears as the gentlest of teachers, showing us that the little death of sleep is practice for the great transition that awaits all living beings. His presence removes any fear of letting go completely, revealing that what we call death is simply another form of the surrender that we practice every night when we fall asleep. Thanatos teaches us that consciousness is not destroyed by the dissolution of its temporary forms but simply changes its mode of expression, like water that becomes vapor without ceasing to be water. This understanding removes the last vestiges of resistance to the complete letting go that sacred sleep requires, allowing us to approach unconsciousness with curiosity and trust rather than fear or clinging. In the gentle presence of Thanatos, we practice the ultimate surrender, the complete letting go of any need to control or direct our experience. This is not passive resignation but active trust, the recognition that the same intelligence that grows our hair and beats our hearts is perfectly capable of managing the processes of sleep and dreams without any conscious intervention on our part. The river Lethe flows more strongly through our awareness now, its waters offering the final cleansing that prepares us for sleep. But this is not the dramatic forgetting of trauma or pain, but the gentle release of the day's accumulation of small tensions and irrelevant details. Like washing the dust of travel from our bodies before entering a temple, we allow the waters of forgetting to cleanse our minds of anything that might disturb the purity of rest. This forgetting is selective and wise, removing what is unnecessary while preserving what is essential. The profound insights and expansive awareness of our night journey are not lost but transferred to deeper levels of consciousness where they can continue their work of transformation while we sleep. Like seeds planted in fertile soil, these insights will continue to grow in the darkness, sending up new shoots of understanding when consciousness returns with the dawn. As the preparation for sleep deepens, we become aware of the presence of Hestia in her role as the guardian of the inner flame that never goes out. Even in the deepest sleep, consciousness itself never ceases but simply withdraws to its most essential core, like a flame burning so purely that it becomes invisible while never losing its essential nature. Hestia's presence assures us that we can let go completely without losing anything essential about ourselves. The awareness that is reading these words and having this experience is not dependent on any particular state of consciousness but is the constant background against which all states of consciousness appear and disappear. This awareness is our true identity, and it remains completely intact regardless of whether we are awake, dreaming, or in the deepest dreamless sleep. The sacred fire that Hestia tends is not separate from our own essential nature but is the very light of consciousness itself, the awareness that makes all experience possible. By recognizing this truth, we can approach sleep not as a temporary death but as a return to our most fundamental nature, a coming home to the source from which we emerged and to which we will eventually return. In this recognition, the transition to sleep becomes not a losing of consciousness but a changing of consciousness, a shift from the particularized awareness of individual identity to the universal awareness that is our deepest nature. This shift happens naturally and automatically when we stop trying to maintain any particular state and simply allow consciousness to find its own level, like water seeking its natural balance. The grove around us seems to be fading now, not disappearing but becoming more transparent, revealing itself as a creation of consciousness rather than a separate external reality. As this recognition dawns, we understand that the sacred space we have been inhabiting exists not outside ourselves but within the infinite interior of our own deepest nature. This understanding completes the preparation for sleep by removing any sense of leaving something precious behind. The grove, the gods, the insights, and expansive awareness of the night's journey are not external acquisitions that might be lost but discoveries about our own essential nature that can never be taken away. They will be present in sleep as they have been present in waking, not as objects of consciousness but as the very ground of consciousness itself. We have arrived at the most gentle and natural conclusion of our long night's journey, the place where all seeking resolves into simple being, where all effort dissolves into effortless rest, where consciousness prepares to return to its source in the healing darkness of sacred sleep. The grove around us has become completely permeable now, existing simultaneously as external sanctuary and internal reality, revealing the ultimate truth that sacred space is not a place we visit but a dimension of our own deepest nature. The quality of darkness has changed subtly in these final minutes, becoming less the darkness of night and more the darkness of the womb, a protective and nurturing environment perfectly designed for the kind of rest that allows complete regeneration and renewal. This darkness is not empty but full, pregnant with all the possibilities that will emerge when consciousness returns refreshed and restored to the world of ordinary awareness. The presence that pervades everything now is no longer identifiable with any particular deity or mythological figure but has become the undifferentiated source from which all the gods and goddesses emerge and to which they return. This is consciousness itself in its most fundamental form, prior to any division into subject and object, self and other, sleeping and waking. In this presence, we discover the peace that surpasses understanding, the rest that restores not just body and mind but soul itself. Our breathing has become so gentle and natural that it seems to happen by itself, each inhalation drawing in not just air but life force itself, each exhalation releasing not just carbon dioxide but all the tensions and concerns that have no place in the sanctuary of sleep. The rhythm of this breathing gradually slows and deepens, becoming a bridge between waking consciousness and the mysterious realm of dreams and dreamless sleep. The body has settled into perfect comfort, supported by the earth beneath and protected by the canopy of stars above. Every muscle has found its natural state of relaxation, every joint has released its unnecessary tension, every organ has settled into the slow, steady rhythms that characterize the deepest states of rest. This is not the forced relaxation of conscious effort but the spontaneous letting go that happens when consciousness recognizes its true home. Any remaining thoughts move slowly and lazily across the mind like clouds drifting across a summer sky, forming and dissolving without urgency or importance. These thoughts are no longer problems to be solved or insights to be grasped but simply the natural activity of a mind that is preparing to rest. Like leaves settling to the ground after the wind has stopped blowing, thoughts gradually become less frequent and less compelling, eventually subsiding into the vast stillness that is their source. The boundary between inner and outer has become completely transparent, so that the coolness of the night air and the warmth of our own body are experienced as different aspects of the same reality. The sound of our own heartbeat and the distant murmur of the spring blend into a single rhythm, the rhythm of life itself as it prepares for the daily renewal that sleep provides. Time has lost its ordinary meaning in these final moments, stretching and contracting like a gentle wave until past and future collapse into an eternal present that has always been and will always be. In this timeless moment, we understand that sleep is not a departure from life but a return to life's source, not a temporary death but a temporary reunion with the deathless awareness that is our true identity. The last vestiges of effort dissolve like sugar in warm water, leaving consciousness free to follow its natural inclination toward rest and renewal. This is not the unconsciousness of exhaustion or intoxication but the conscious unconsciousness of one who has learned to trust completely in the intelligence that governs all natural processes. Like a master musician who has learned to play without thinking, we have learned to sleep without trying. The grove, the night, the journey we have taken together all begin to fade like a dream upon waking, but in reverse, revealing themselves to have been dreamlike all along. This is not a loss but a completion, not an ending but a transformation, not a forgetting but a remembering of something even more fundamental than memory itself. As consciousness prepares for its final surrender to sleep, we are graced with the understanding that everything we have experienced tonight has been a preparation for this moment, a teaching about the nature of ultimate letting go. All the gods and goddesses, all the stories and insights, all the expansion and transcendence have been leading to this simple recognition, that the highest spiritual achievement is the ability to rest completely in our own essential nature. The darkness that now embraces us is not the darkness of ignorance or unconsciousness but the luminous darkness of the source from which all light emerges. In this darkness, consciousness does not disappear but returns to its origin, like a river flowing back to the ocean from which it emerged. This return is not a loss of individual identity but a recognition that individual identity was always a temporary manifestation of something much vaster and more fundamental. In these final moments of conscious awareness, we feel the profound gratitude that comes at the end of any perfect experience. Like guests who have been royally entertained and are now being gently shown to comfortable quarters for the night, we feel the deep appreciation for all that has been given and a complete readiness to surrender to whatever comes next. The last conscious thought is not really a thought at all but a feeling, a quality of being that encompasses everything and nothing, fullness and emptiness, gratitude and surrender all at once. It is the feeling of coming home after a long journey, of being held in safety after danger has passed, of being loved unconditionally after believing such love was impossible. And then, like a candle flame that has burned down to its base and gently extinguishes itself, individual consciousness returns to its source in the vast ocean of awareness from which it emerged. This is not death but birth, not loss but discovery, not ending but beginning. In the perfect darkness of sacred sleep, the deepest healing begins, the most profound learning occurs, the most essential renewal takes place. The night receives us like a mother receives a tired child, with infinite tenderness and patience, asking nothing and giving everything. In this ultimate surrender, we discover that what we thought was our individual consciousness was always just a wave on the ocean of universal awareness, and now that wave returns to its source, enriched by its journey but fundamentally unchanged in its essential nature. Sleep comes now not as unconsciousness but as the deepest form of consciousness, not as absence but as presence, not as emptiness but as fullness. In sleep, we remember what we have always known but temporarily forgotten, that we are not separate beings struggling alone in a hostile universe but expressions of the one consciousness that is the source and substance of all existence. And in that remembering, in that ultimate homecoming, in that perfect rest, all seeking ends and all finding begins. The sacred sleep that now embraces us is not just the end of this night's journey but the beginning of all the journeys that will follow, each one a new exploration of the inexhaustible mystery of consciousness discovering itself in ever new forms. Sweet dreams, dear traveler. Rest well in the knowledge that you are held always in the loving awareness that is your true home, your deepest nature, your eternal rest. Sleep now, and let the healing darkness restore you completely for whatever adventures await when consciousness next chooses to play in the light of a new day. The grove remains, as it always has and always will, a sanctuary in the heart of being itself, waiting patiently for the next seeker who needs to remember the way home to their own essential nature. The stories continue, as they always have and always will, weaving themselves into the dreams of those who have learned to listen with the heart rather than just the mind. All is well. All has always been well. All will always be well. Rest now in that eternal truth, and let sleep carry you to the shores of the deathless awareness that is your birthright, your blessing, your eternal home. Sleep well.